The scream was still lodged in his throat. A ghost of a scream from 10 years in the future, a sound torn from him as he bled out on the cracked linoleum of a looted pharmacy, a rusty shard of metal in his gut. Alex Miller died in the year 2034. He awoke in the year 2024. He opened his eyes not to the water-stained ceiling of a Chicago ruin, but to the familiar plaster of his own bedroom. The sunlight, a real and warm thing, not a hazy, dust-filtered glow, streamed through the blinds. He smelled coffee brewing. He heard the distant rhythmic rumble of a garbage truck, a sound he hadn't heard in a decade. A symphony. He sat bolt upright, his heart hammering against his ribs, not with fear but with a dizzying, impossible vertigo. The sheets were clean. His body didn't ache. There were no scars on his hands from fighting over a can of expired peaches. He looked at his hands. They were soft, an architect's hands, not the gnarled, calloused claws of a scavenger. Sarah walked into the room, a mug in her hand. His wife. She was beautiful, not the gaunt, hollow-eyed memory he had clutched in the dark for so long. Her hair was washed. Her clothes were clean. She was alive. "You're up early," she said, her voice a melody that broke him. Tears streamed down his face, silent hot rivers of disbelief and grief, and a hope so fierce it was agonizing. "Alex! Honey, what's wrong?" She rushed to his side, her brow furrowed with concern. He couldn't speak. He just pulled her to him, burying his face in her hair, inhaling the scent of her shampoo, a scent of a world that was still whole. He was home, he was back, and he was terrified. He pulled away and looked at the phone on his nightstand. Tuesday, October 15th, 2024. 7 days. He had 7 days before the world ended. The news reports would start tomorrow. Small, dismissible articles on the BBC and CNN international feeds. A strange, rapid-onset neurological disorder in a remote village in Southeast Asia. A prion disease, they'd eventually call it. A misfolded protein that turned the human brain to sponge. They called it the rot. There was no cure. Its vector was horrifyingly efficient. It lived in water, in soil, in the air. The world had no idea it was already on a death sentence. But he did. He stood up, the ghosts of the future screaming at him to move. "Sarah, listen to me," he said, his voice raw. "I need you to trust me. No questions. Not yet. Just trust me." The look in his eyes, a haunted, ancient look that didn't belong in his 38-year-old face, stopped her questions. She just nodded. The plan exploded in his mind, fully formed, a blueprint forged in 10 years of brutal survival. First, money. He spent the next hour online. He liquidated his 401k, taking the massive tax hit without a second thought. He emptied their joint savings account. He called the credit card companies and requested the highest possible limit increases, citing a major home renovation. By noon, he had access to nearly $500,000 of digital currency that would be worthless in a month. That afternoon, he told his boss he was quitting, effective immediately. Family emergency. He didn't care. His old life was a husk. The next phase was acquisition. He and Sarah drove the F-150 to the nearest Costco. Pushing the oversized cart through the brightly lit aisles was a surreal experience. People ambled along complaining about prices, sampling sausages. They were ghosts, the walking dead. They just didn't know it yet. Alex moved with a feverish intensity. He wasn't shopping, he was arming an ark. Carts overflowed with 50-pound bags of rice and beans, cases of high-end canned tuna and chicken, boxes of medical-grade honey and salt. He bought the largest generator they had, along with every can of gasoline he was allowed. He bought a pallet of bottled water, not for drinking but for bartering. He spent an hour in the pharmacy aisle, clearing the shelves of antibiotics, painkillers, iodine sutures, and trauma kits. The pharmacist gave him a strange look. "Big camping trip?" she asked. "Something like that," Alex said, his jaw tight. He bought tools. High-end axes, saws, hammers, a complete mechanics tool set. He bought maps, detailed topographical maps of every state west of the Mississippi. He knew the internet and GPS would be among the first luxuries to die. The guns came next. This was America. In the future, a reliable firearm was the only law that mattered. He went to 3 different gun stores. He used cash. He bought a Ruger 10-20 simple, reliable, its .22 ammunition, plentiful and lightweight, a Mossberg 500 shotgun, the sound of its pump action a universal language for back off, and a Glock 19, the cockroach of handguns. He bought thousands of rounds for each. The background checks cleared. He was a citizen in good standing in a nation on the brink of non-existence. The entire time Sarah watched him, her face a mixture of confusion and growing dread. In the car, surrounded by a mountain of survival gear, she finally broke. "Alex, you have to tell me what's going on. Are we in trouble? Is someone after us?" He pulled the truck over. He looked at his wife, the woman he had watched die of a simple infection in the ruins of a Denver suburb, and knew he couldn't tell her the truth. She would think he was insane. She might leave. He couldn't risk it. "I had a wake-up call," he lied, the words tasting like ash. "The economy, the state of the world. It's all fragile, Sarah, more than anyone knows. I want us to be safe. I found a place, a cabin in the Colorado Rockies, isolated, self-sufficient. We can go there just for a while, a long vacation. I can work remotely." It was a weak lie, but it was all he had. "You emptied our retirement for a vacation?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I emptied it for us," he said, meeting her gaze. "For Maya. Trust me, please. In 1 week, none of this will matter." He drove to their daughter's school. Maya, 8 years old, ran out to the truck, her backpack bouncing. Seeing her alive and whole, a child with a future, was like a physical blow. In his memory, she was a small, crudely carved wooden cross on a hillside. He hugged her so tightly she grunted. That night he didn't sleep. He sat at the computer, a tangle of hard drives connected to it. He downloaded everything, the entirety of Wikipedia, medical textbooks, engineering manuals, agricultural guides, military survival field manuals. He downloaded movies, music, and books, terabytes of culture that would become more valuable than gold. He was building a library for the end of the world. The first reports hit the news the next morning, just as he knew they would. A small headline on the BBC's website. "Mysterious illness in rural Borneo." Sarah pointed it out over breakfast. "Scary," she said. Alex just nodded, his face a grim mask. The clock was ticking. They packed the truck. He was ruthless. He packed tools, supplies, weapons, and the hard drives. He allowed Sarah and Maya 1 box each for personal items, family photos, a favorite book, a stuffed animal. Everything else was left behind. The house they had built, the life they had made, was already a museum of a dead civilization. As they drove out of their quiet suburban neighborhood for the last time, Maya waved goodbye to her friend's house. The radio was playing a pop song, the sun was shining, it was a perfect autumn day, and Alex Miller drove toward the mountains, the ghost of a scream still lodged in his throat, a sentinel who had already seen the fall of man. The scarcity, the violence, the breakdown of everything was not a theory to him, it was a memory, and he would not let it happen to his family again.